let me start by indicating that there's going to be 3 parts to this seminar. An introductory 10 minutes where I kind of get you mentally warmed up, if you will, for the theoretical material to follow. Then there's going to be a listing of an actual concrete training program and a break whereafter Brian Johnson's going to do a practical. So let's just get started here with the introductory material. While I will be providing you today with an actual training program, actually later in the seminar, I want you to know from the outset, ladies and gentlemen, that my purpose today, my primary purpose, is to teach you something meaningful, of value, that is, about a logical approach to the subject of productive bodybuilding exercise. Logic is, after all, man's method of gaining knowledge, which is his means of survival and is therefore of most fundamental value in human existence. Man is not an instinctual creature, as you've been reading about in especially the Weeder magazine. Instincts cannot coexist in a creature whose fundamental defining characteristic is his conceptual or cognitive faculty, which can only be used by a volitional choice. Now, don't let some of these words frighten you. You came here to learn something today, hopefully of value. Where words are new, don't be afraid. Write them down and look them up later on. You might find that they will prove of great value in your future thinking and learning. Instincts, audience, are a form of knowledge that is hardwired into animals and therefore guides them not volitionally by choice, but automatically and unerringly. Man is a conceptual being who gains and uses knowledge only through an act of choice, a process of thought, or a volitional cognitive effort, as stated previously. And it is because one must exercise his power of choice, specific effort of will to initiate and sustain a process of thought that many just refuse to do it. They apparently find the effort involved too much or not to their liking. As a humorous side note here, years ago when I was working for Joe Weeder out at his offices in Woodland Hills, one of his top editors and I were joking about the Weeder instinctive principle when my cohort had me cracking up saying, "Mike, if people were to follow their instincts, here they wouldn't lift weights at all, they would defecate and urinate on them." Wasn't that funny, huh? Having been brought up in an anti-rational culture, many are not taught to value logic and thus never achieve what I refer to as intellectual self-sufficiency. That is, the ability to think logically, rationally, and to judge independently for yourself. What's the use, ladies and gentlemen, of having muscles that would do credit to an adult gorilla when you can't even think effectively about a subject like bodybuilding, which is of passionate concern? Most people have uncritically accepted faith as a means of knowledge. Faith, in fact, is the opposite or the antithesis of reason. It is literally the blind acceptance of ideas for which there is no sensory proof or rational evidence. Along with the idea that you should judge not, you also hear the other admonition, keep an open mind. The idea that one should not judge or that he should keep an open mind is actually very dangerous, literally. It is used to keep you confused by suggesting it is a virtue to plausibility to everything. Obviously, not everything can be true. Since some ideas you read about contradict other ideas, how can they all be true? Simple logic. And remember, that's what my purpose is here today. In addition to providing you with an actual training program, I'd like to teach you at least something of value about a logical approach to bodybuilding. No, you should not be concerned with developing an open mind, but an active mind, one that treats ideas critically, seeking to distinguish truth from falsehood. The approach of most bodybuilders to training from the start amounts to little more than a blind leap into the dark. Throughout life, we all, you and I, everybody, were inundated by innumerable theories on every subject, from religion to philosophy, to politics, to the healing arts, nutrition, and bodybuilding science. And because so few in our culture were taught to think rationally or to judge critically, most of us are left disconcertingly confused when confronted with the necessity of making intellectual choices, such as which training theory to employ. In fact, how many bodybuilders, how many people do you know, honestly, possibly including yourself, and I was this way at one time, how many people are not confused on the subject of how to approach bodybuilding exercise? You were confused. Good for you. You're one of the rational few. In fact, I did realize I was like this when I was in my late teens. Most symptomatic was the notion that if something was printed, it had to be true. I learned later that my notion was illogical, as of course not every idea can be true, as I said earlier, because so many of them conflict with and contradict other ideas. In fact, it was Arthur Jones, who many of you know, or know of, who divested me of that bit of ragtag illogic when he literally barked at me, and that's the way he talks to everyone, "Mike, goddammit, just because something is printed doesn't mean it's true." In fact, 90% of what is printed on all subjects is outright hogwash. And now, some 25 years later, some considerable thought, a lot of study and experience later, I realized that Mr. Jones was in fact being charitable. It's not 90% of what is printed on all subjects is outright hogwash. It's closer to 98%, literally. 98% of what you read. Remember, we do live, that is you and I, as Canadians and Americans, we live in a semi-free country. Can you imagine you imagine all the editors and publishers and writers of all the magazines stay up burning the midnight oil, searching the truth in everything they write? Of course not. Understanding this, audience, is a first step towards developing your critical ability. Your critical ability. The concept of critical ability is new to some people. Like I suggested earlier, you're here today to learn. Just because you hear new concepts, new terms, things that might be unfamiliar, don't just bypass them or let them scare you. Write them down and think about them later and incorporate them into your thinking. As much as this seminar is about the human body and its improvement, this seminar is actually more about the human mind and its improvement. Why? Why would a seminar on bodybuilding also be about the mind? Because obviously, logically, you don't have to be a genius, we all know this on some level of awareness, human intelligence, not instincts, is what makes it possible to understand anything at all, including exercise or bodybuilding science. And that which is most interesting to all of us, namely us, we the member of the species man. As someone once said, the divine spark in the great chain of being. We human beings are the highest of all living species on earth. It has been averred all too often by many, even those in the bodybuilding field, that we bodybuilders are dumb and stupid, which simply isn't true, as evidenced by the number of phone calls I receive every single day, all day long, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. I receive phone calls every day from people from all walks of life, including physicists, doctors, chemists, stockbrokers, students, tradesmen, truck drivers, people who were obviously very productive, quite bright and intelligent, who also just happen to be bodybuilders.